Hello, history buffs, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're returning back the clock over 2.5 millennia to witness the birth of one of the most influential civilizations in history. We're talking about the dramatic, legendary, and world-changing founding of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE. Forget what you think you know from the movies. The real story is even more compelling. So, how does a monarchy that had ruled for over 2 centuries just end? The story begins with Rome's 7th and final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. As his nickname suggests, he wasn't exactly a man of the people. His reign was marked by tyranny, extravagance, and a blatant disregard for Roman traditions and the Senate. He ruled with an iron fist, using fear and force to maintain control. The people of Rome were growing restless, their patience wearing thin. All they needed was a spark to ignite the flames of revolution. That spark came in the form of a deeply personal and tragic event. According to the historian Livy, the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, committed a heinous crime against a noble and virtuous Roman matron named Lucretia. After the assault, Lucretia, consumed by shame, revealed the crime to her husband and father before tragically taking her own life in front of them. She made them swear an oath to avenge her honor. Her death was not in vain. A nobleman named Lucius Junius Brutus, a relative of the king who had long feigned foolishness to survive Tarquin's purges, seized the moment. He carried Lucretia's body to the Roman Forum, the heart of the city. There, he delivered a fiery speech, recounting not just the tragedy of Lucretia, but all the crimes and injustices committed by Tarquin and his family. He roused the people's anger and grief into a revolutionary fervor. The public outcry was deafening. The citizens of Rome, moved by Brutus's words and the sight of the virtuous Lucretia, voted to depose and exile King Tarquin and his entire family. The age of kings was over, but what would replace it? The Romans were determined never again to place power in the hands of a single individual. Their solution was radical and ingenious: a res publica, a public affair or commonwealth. This is where we get the word republic. The core idea was to create a system of government with checks and balances to prevent any one person from becoming a tyrant. At the very top of this new structure were 2 consuls, why 2, to prevent a monopoly on power. These consuls were elected annually and held equal authority. Each consul could veto the other's decision, a power known as intercessio. This forced them to cooperate and find common ground. They were the chief executives, leading the army in times of war and presiding over the government in times of peace. Brutus himself, along with Lucretia's widowed husband, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, became the very first consuls of the new republic. But the consuls didn't rule alone. The old advisory body, the Senate, was given a much more significant role. Composed of the heads of Rome's most powerful patrician families, the Senate controlled state finances, foreign affairs, and proposed laws. While they couldn't pass laws themselves, their influence, or auctoritas, was immense. Think of them as the experienced elder statesmen guiding the ship of state. No consul would dare ignore the Senate's advice without risking serious political fallout. So we have the consuls and the Senate, but what about the common people, the plebeians? This is where the early constitution gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit messy. Initially, the power was heavily concentrated in the hands of the patricians, the aristocratic upper class. The plebeians, who made up the vast majority of the population, farmers, merchants, artisans, and soldiers, had very few rights. They could vote in certain assemblies, but these assemblies were structured in a way that always gave the wealthy a greater voice. They couldn't hold high office, and they couldn't even marry patricians. As you can imagine, this didn't sit well with the plebeians. They were the backbone of the Roman army, yet they were treated like second-class citizens. This tension led to one of the most significant political struggles in Roman history, known as the conflict of the orders. It wasn't a single bloody civil war, but rather a series of protests, negotiations, and political standoffs that lasted for nearly 200 years. The plebeians had a powerful weapon: secession. On several occasions, when their demands were ignored, the entire plebeian population would pack up and leave the city, refusing to work or fight until the patricians gave in. This was a brilliant tactic. Without the plebeians, Rome was defenseless and its economy would grind to a halt. Through these struggles, the plebeians gradually won major concessions. One of the first and most important victories was the creation of the office of the tribune of the plebs around 494 BCE. These tribunes were elected by the plebeians and had the extraordinary power to veto any act of a magistrate or the Senate that they felt harmed the common people. Their physical bodies were declared sacrosanct, meaning anyone who harmed a tribune could be killed without penalty. This gave the plebeians a direct voice and a powerful protector at the very heart of the government. Another monumental step forward was the creation of the 12 tables around 450 BCE. Before this, the law was unwritten and interpreted by patrician priests who often applied it to their own advantage. The plebeians demanded that the laws be written down and displayed publicly for all to see. The result was a set of 12 bronze tablets inscribed with Rome's legal code, covering everything from property rights to family law. This was a massive victory for transparency and equality under the law. It meant that justice was no longer a secret controlled by the elite. Over the next century and a half, the plebeians continued to chip away at the patrician monopoly. They won the right to marry patricians, the right to have one of the two consuls be a plebeian, and eventually access to all religious and political offices. The resolutions passed by the plebeian assembly, the concilium plebis, were eventually given the force of law for all Roman citizens, patrician and plebeian alike. By around 287 BCE, the conflict of the orders was largely over. The early Roman constitution had evolved from an aristocracy into a more complex and, arguably, more balanced republic. It was a unique blend of different elements: the monarchical power of the consuls, the aristocratic influence of the Senate, and the democratic power of the popular assemblies and their tribunes. The Greek historian Polybius would later marvel at this mixed constitution, believing it was the source of Rome's incredible strength and stability. This system, forged in revolution and refined through centuries of internal struggle, would allow Rome to conquer the Italian peninsula, defeat its great rival Carthage, and eventually build an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia. The principles born in 509 BCE, the rejection of absolute power, the importance of checks and balances, the rule of law, and the idea of civic duty would echo through the ages, influencing the founders of modern nations, including the United States. The story of the early republic is a powerful reminder that governments are not set in stone. They are living things that can be challenged, changed, and improved by the will of the people. It's a tale of how a city, sparked by a personal tragedy, overthrew a king and embarked on an unprecedented experiment in self-governance. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to ancient Rome. What part of the early republic's constitution do you find most fascinating? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into history. Until next time, stay curious.